Okay, welcome to Into the Channel podcast, primarily about women's football. Before we hit the pitch, if you enjoy the show or love women's football as much as your boys do, come kick it with us already. Subscribe, follow YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you like to watch or listen. Leave us a review over at your favorite podcast app. Links to all of our socials in the show notes of this episode. I am your host, Dino De Cespedes, and as always, I am joined by my co-host, Mr. Grant Engel. What is up, man?
I'm feeling all right, buddy. Fighting through a little something, but I've been told that alcohol kills germs. So I think I'm ready to go. I've also heard that talking about the UEFA Women's Champions League also can help you heal. So smash the like and subscribe buttons for more organic health tips. I think that's something YouTubers do. You should always trust YouTubers with these kind of things. No, but I digress. Right off the bat, to start the show, I'm feeling great. I'm ready to talk about some football.
Let's do it. So are we cracking these? Yeah, we're cracking.
Yeah, well, might as well. I'm ready. Cheers to you.
Cheers to you, my good man. Cheers to the group stage.
It's pretty good. Pretty entertaining.
Totally agree. Quick programming reminder. Next week, we'll be back with our best 11s of 2024 and back in the new year to talk player movement. The NWSL has been pretty lit along that dimension. In January, we will be back. I think we're going to shift focus to Europe. I think that's going to make the most sense.
Yeah.
WSL, Frauen Bundesliga, Liga F, Serie A Femenil, the Premier League, and February 7th, as you know, we'll be back live on YouTube after the UEFA Women's Champions League quarterfinal draw to talk about those matchups. Champions League quarterfinals returns March 18th and March 19th. That wraps up our very quick programming reminder. Thank you for bearing with us. Mr. Grant Engel, where do you want to get started?
I believe it is. It's not even that I believe. I know for a fact that it is. Our last opportunity. It is our last opportunity to go in alphabetical order, which I think we should do.
I love it. Let's do it. So, according to my ITC personal record book, that means we should start with Group A.
Yes.
Let's kick it off. Lyon, 18 points from 6 matches. Pretty good. 19 goals scored, just 1 allowed. I think offensively, they look really strong. I think kind of typical Lyon, but I think defensively is, I think, where they've really stood out. Just 1 goal allowed, as mentioned, over the 6 group stage matches. That's pretty impressive. And then, sort of sneaky fun fact, when you look at their defenders, Wendy Renard, Vanessa Gilles, they combined for 5 goals in the group stage. That's pretty awesome. Tough to stop Lyon when you're getting that kind of productivity from all the way in the back. On offense, though, 9 different goal scorers for the squad, 7 different players notched an assist over the 6 matches. And then I think when you zoom in a little bit on that defense, 2 matches versus that high-powered Wolfsburg attack, 0 goals, just 4 shots on target. I mean, they shut the water down on pretty much everything that Group A kind of threw at them. I think I'm going to remember Lyon's defense. But like I said, they were able to kind of hold Wolfsburg in serious check.
For sure. I'm glad you mentioned that because for anybody who likes fun stats. So in the group stage, Lyon conceded 9 shot attempts on target across those 6 matches. And I'm glad you mentioned Renard and Gilles because by themselves, Diani, Renard, and Gilles combined for 9 goals in the group stage.
Wow.
So they're only letting you shoot on target 9 times and just 2 center backs and 1 winger equal for 9 goals total. I think it was a pretty dominating performance. There were no hiccups like last year's group stage. Obviously last year, that magical evening in Bergen, Norway, they had that draw versus the mighty SK Brann. And then in the final group stage match last year, they had that kind of wild 2-2 draw with our old pals Slavia Praha. That was on the strength of a superhuman goalkeeping performance by Olivia Lukasova and an unfortunate own goal by the aforementioned Vanessa Gilles, who we saw have like a bad mistake in I think it was either She Believes or the CONCACAF W Gold Cup. Vanessa Gilles has pretty much eliminated those type of mistakes. I mean, she has been absolutely fantastic. I feel like she is, in terms of just like, since you and I have been closely covering, which is only till 2023, so I'm not going to act like we have any kind of like deep historic knowledge. But in that time frame, I would argue Vanessa Gilles is one of the most improved players that we've probably closely watched.
I love that take. And I think, I'm not sure if you were the one that mentioned it, but she started playing ball relatively late.
I believe in her teens, yeah.
That's wild. Yeah. And I think, physically, she's just such a force. She plays with tenacity. And I think her decision making, her instincts have gotten better. I mean, you could just see it. Like they shut everything, they shut everything down. And offensively, she's kind of a threat too. In match day 6 against Wolfsburg, that one ends 1-0 I kind of like that Lyon basically started all their all their starters. It was just like, nah, we're going to actually come out here and like really give it everything. No Lynette Bernstein, no Eula Brand in the starting lineup for Wolfsburg. But Brand comes in a little bit later. She crosses over Danielle Van de Donk in this one, spins her totally around. Van de Donk recovers, dispossesses her. Perfect ball ahead into the path of Diani, who just is dazzling on the ball. I mean, total wizardry shit. And then puts a ball back into the box. And Danielle Van de Donk gets on the end of it, just kind of like, finesses it into the goal to make it 1-0. I thought the announcer had made a mistake because I was like, there's no way Van de Donk dispossessed it for Eula Brand at the halfway line and then was the deepest player to take the pass from Diani and finish. I was like, oh, announcer fucked that one up. That's impossible. And then I was like, oh my God. She sends the ball to Diani and the Diani is just magic. And it kind of like was part of the magic trick of like fooling me into thinking that there was no way that Van de Donk got there, but she did. It was a given goal that covered 40 yards, got it done. And I think just a credit to Lyon, their professionalism and their just, willingness to be like, no, we're going to win all 6 of these and go in completely unblemished.
Yeah. I mean, I think the mental toughness is pretty clear. That's just like who Van de Donk is, of just like always hustling, big time motor. And yeah, the finesse on that touch, little kind of like back heel-ish, it's kind of going through the legs. You just give it a little bit of guidance to get into the goal. That Diani Hezi to get herself open, she completely fools the defender. But I mean, if you're the defender, you have no other choice there, because when Diani pulls up like that, you're terrified she's going to cut in and then she'll score top corner like that. But then when she kind of hits you with the hezi and then she streaks toward the end line to play in the pass, you're dead either way. So, not a lot you can do as a defender there. They look incredibly strong, even against Wolfsburg, a team that I believe is particularly strong. But I feel like you might have some other ideas about our pals from Germany.
Well, I took a look at the betting odds this week, and I was actually surprised and not surprised. Wolfsburg's got the 7th best odds out of 8 teams. So that means the odds makers believe that 6 teams are more likely to win the tournament than Wolfsburg is. The only team behind them would be Real Madrid.
Sure.
That's what I was thinking. I was a little surprised by that, but I can kind of see how it checks out. So it does feel like this team might be drawing dead against every 1 seed except Arsenal. I don't think, based on what we saw against Lyon, again, 0 goals, just 4 shots on target. They lose that 2-match tie 3-0 on aggregate to Lyon. Not that it's counted that way, but weren't able to get anything going against Lyon. I'm not sure they would fare much better against Barcelona or Chelsea. Arsenal, you can make a case, but I think Lyon provided a little bit of reality check on maybe where their expectations might be. And maybe it just is that Wolfsburg is a good team, not a great team when you consider, okay, the teams at the very, very top of Europe, where do they stack up?
There is a Wolfsburg Ohio State Buckeyes football comparison I would like to make, but I will not waste everybody's time with this. I think it's an interesting observation. I think you're probably right. You kind of go back and think about the matches. Did Wolfsburg just kind of pad their stats? Did they skew the data with 2 5-0 victories over Galatasaray? Now, they ran it up against Roma in their second fixture against them after dropping match day 2 to Roma. Alex Popp had 3 of her 4 goals in the group stage in one of those 5-0 wins over Galatasaray. I mean, she's leading the competition with 24 shots, but only 7 were on target. So I just think there appears to be a little bit of a lack of connectivity in their attack. And when you see like some of the goal scoring numbers, you're like, okay, yeah, it looks like they're playing well. But when you kind of dig just that 1/2 step deeper into the context, I think you're right to have some real concerns. I will say, at the end of the Lyon match, Eula Brand isn't going to get credited for a shot on target because it went just wide, but she absolutely could have equalized in the dying embers of that match. She had Endler totally beat. It looked like it was maybe a foot or maybe even less than that wide of the left post, but you're right. I mean, they just couldn't really put anything together. And between Lyon, Barcelona, and Chelsea, there's not a ton of difference there. So if you can't score on Lyon, and we've talked about their great defense, it's not like Barcelona and Chelsea's defense are that much different. I think you could ask some questions about Chelsea's defense more so than the Lyon and Barca. But I think you might be right. Maybe a good team, not a great team.
A good chance we see that bear out once we get to the quarterfinals. I do want to touch on the other 2 teams to round out Group A. Salute to one of my favorite squad, my Serie A Femminile side for sure, AS Roma. Couple highlights. You had the Giulia Dragoni 74th minute goal to put them up 1-0 away versus Lyon. Again, that was the only goal that Lyon allowed in 6 group stage matchups. So, nothing to sneeze at there. Manuela Giuliano, Lucia de Guglielmo. Both played really, really well over the 6 matches. We can think back to Giuliano's 14th minute PK to put them up versus Wolfsburg 1-0. And then match day 6, shout out to Rosanna Ventriglia, who turned 17 years old on December 13th. Happy belated, Rosanna.
Oh, wow.
So she makes her professional debut on December 14th, a week ago, with Roma down 1-0 at Napoli. So Spugna puts her in the 79th minute. She gets 12 minutes, one shot on target, one goal creating action, and Roma goes on to score 2 goals in the 87th and the 92nd to beat Napoli, come from behind, 2-1 win. And then versus Galatasaray comes on in the 61st. It's 1-0 Roma. She gets a goal in the 82nd. The in-house AV starts blasting All the Small Things by Blink-182. Pretty fun moment, just max volume. That was fun.
Amazing.
And then 90+3, a smart layoff to Elena Linari to notch an assist. How about that for Ventriglia? So, nice moment, to maybe carry into Serie A Femminile. A player to definitely keep our eye on.
No doubt. But if you want to hear something that's slightly less pleasant than that, if Ventriglia turned 17 recently, she was not born for another 5 years when All the Small Things came out. So just for everybody watching the show, I think that the metrics show that we're all roughly the same age. That one struck me a little bit. When I thought about that, I was like, ooh, I think that came out in like 99 or 2000. So that's fantastic.
There you go. Good chance she got no clue what. Just looking around, it's like, what the hell is this?
Yeah, something tells me her parents might not be blasting the Blink-182 back catalog. But shout to Roma. You love them for good reason. I remain enamored with Valentina Giacinti and Manuela Giuliano, of course. They improved 9 points in the group stage this year. They only had 5 last year. Losing Evelyn Vienne to that minor muscle injury, without them giving a ton of other context to what that was, I think she left. I don't know if she left or got hurt in that 4-1 loss to Lyon on November 20th, but I think that was the last match she played. So that obviously didn't help matters. We talked about it a little bit. It just felt like they didn't have enough offense to go to. They have some young players. You mentioned Ventriglia. I think about Giulia Dragoni. She's 18. Alice Corelli is 21. She scored in both of the matches versus Galatasaray. They just need to beef up that depth in the attack, give Giacinti a little bit of support, and hopefully we'll see him back again next year.
Yeah, I'd love to see Giacinti with a little bit less pressure on her. I mean, a little bit more space. It's just she's always taking on 2 or 3 or just having to go really quickly.
Yeah.
Great player. And then, the depth for sure. We saw them kind of stall out 2 different times. That match against Lyon where they were up 1-0. And then obviously the second one to Wolfsburg when they just get worked that last 20 minutes.
Yeah.
One more team, Group A, real quick, Galatasaray. Shout out to them. Really enjoyed watching players like Andrea Stashkova, who scored versus Roma. Keeper, Gamzat Nuryaman. ITC favorites, fucking go. 61 saves on those 88. Oh, wow. And that's against Lyon, Wolfsburg, and Roma. I mean, a ton of work to do. Stepped up really big. Will definitely be the first player I think of from this group stage.
Yeah, I knew she would be busy, but goodness, I did not expect the numbers to skew that heavily. So, I mean, unbelievable performance by her. Even when you end up with a big negative goal differential like that, she was clearly putting in a ton of work out there. I'm glad you mentioned Stashkova. Great piece to build around, 24 years old. They'll need to replace the 34-year-old legend Kata Usme at some point, but I think it's worth mentioning, of the 20 players who appeared in this tournament, 11 of them are 27 or younger. So they have a good mix of players who are kind of entering their prime or in their prime. So I look forward to watching them play. Maybe next year we'll see it. Something tells me the qualifying and then the league play, like the new format, I think we're in for some major surprises and a lot of new faces.
Yeah, here's hoping. That's definitely exciting. Let's shift gears. Group B, your domain. Where do you want to get started, Group B?
Let's start with the winners. I think that this is a good path that we're on here. Chelsea Football Club, 6 matches played, 6 matches won, similar to Lyon. They're the only 2 clubs in this tournament to achieve that this year.
Oh, as predicted by your boy, Chelsea 6 for 6.
Let's go.
I said they might be the only one, but not too bad.
Still counts. Absolutely counts. Shout to you. Nicely done, sir.
A little patty pat on the back. My bad. Sorry to
got to. No, what are we doing here? I mean, if anything, this is pretty much an entire exercise to pat ourselves on the back. So Chelsea can certainly win this tournament. But it's funny that some of these basic stats didn't really jump out among the teams that qualified for the knockout rounds. So they had 19 goals for. That's tied for 3rd with Lyon. And it's behind Barca and Real Madrid. They had 6 goals conceded. That's tied for 3rd with Bayern Munich and Manchester City. The 3-2 victory over Real Madrid on matchday 1 wasn't quite as close as the scoreline indicated. Real Madrid, they pulled one back down from 2-0, then they pulled one back down from 3-1, but it was odd that Chelsea never really slammed the door shut at home like that. And then they had that 2-1 victory over Celtic, which was harder fought than I think most folks really expected.
Oh, yeah.
And now, when you look at their recent form, you have the strange 1-1 draw to Leicester, and then they went down in the first half on matchday 6 to Madrid as Caroline Weir was just bossing that entire first half.
So good.
And it brings me to this. So Sonia Bonpastor, after the Leicester performance, here's what she had to say. Quote, "If you analyze this game, the first half was not intense enough from us. We did not show our intentions, and I think we got punished for that. The second half was better. We created more chances and opportunities, but we only scored one. We were not efficient enough to win this game." So that's on the 1-1 draw versus Leicester. Now on the Madrid performance. Quote, "I was not happy at halftime. I said, we need to be on the same page. We only have 45 minutes to achieve our goal, and after, you will be on your vacation. So just give it everything you have." End quote. This recent run, if you can call it a run, 2 matches, where they kind of fall behind in the first half, and Bonpastor is very clearly annoyed with it, I think is a little tiny baby red flag, but I won't react too much to it just yet.
I think that's fair. Well, to talk real quick about Chelsea Real Madrid, I thought their poise really showed in that match. And that's probably something that's got Bonpastor's fingerprints all over it. They kept their cool. Literally nothing changed after the weird. I mean, in my house, shit changed after the weird goal. I was losing my damn mind. But for Chelsea, nothing changed at all. Normal day at the office. They stuck to it, and they were able to work their way back into the match and then regain control of the match, I think, more importantly. But maybe another baby red flag for me, well, a couple of them actually. I don't think Mayra Ramirez has been able to fully get going under Bonpastor. And I think that has coincided with the somewhat meteoric reascension of Kat Macario.
Yeah.
And I think maybe it could just be that Macario is more of a Bonpastor player than Ramirez. I'm not really sure. That's a little bit above my pay grade. But I think the other red flag that I'm kind of like checking in on is that back line.
Yeah.
They've got 5 players with real experience to choose from for 4 spots. Neem Charles, Lucy Bronze, Millie Bright, Natalie Bjorn, Ashley Lawrence. A couple of, injury history things to think about with those 5. Obviously, Bronze is a little bit older. Millie Bright is coming back from that devastating injury, and just not a lot of depth. And I think when you look at it, you mentioned they conceded 6 goals, but they also conceded in 5 of the 6 group stage matches. So that's a little worrisome, especially when you got Lyon on the other side giving up 1 goal in those 6 matches and whatever, like 5, whatever you mentioned in terms of shots on target, some ridiculous number.
Right.
So I think offensively, they'll get it sorted. Vika Kaptein, definitely a revelation offensively. No LJ just yet. I think we're expecting her back in the new year. Cannerud, I think, has cooled off a little bit, but Guro Wrighton on the other side. I think she started in WSL in goals, which I think is a little bit of a surprise because you don't really think of her as their go-to, number 1 goal scoring option.
Yep.
So I think offensively they'll get it sorted, but defensively, I don't know. Something to keep an eye on.
I think you're right to kind of wave a little bit of attention to that. I think that makes a lot of sense. And you're definitely right about Macario being a Sonia Bonpastor player. She played under her at Lyon before she came over to Chelsea. So I think that's natural. But I also think people should be very, very afraid that if Kat Macario and Mayra Ramirez start intertwining their play from number 10 and number 9, it could be real scary hours for everybody else. I mean, Macario comes on in the second half of this Madrid game and just wins the match for them in the first 10 minutes of the second half. I mean, just wins it for them. I mean, Olga Carmona, I don't know if I've ever seen her have 2 bad moments in the course of 5 matches. She had 2 bad moments in 10 minutes. Like, she was in a vice versus Kat Macario. No shots at Olga. I mean, obviously, I would argue if we're not the number 1 Olga Carmona appreciator podcast, we're definitely top 5. But I mean, Macario just looked like an absolute world beater. But I think you're right. Lucy Bronze, looking at Olga doing great things, Olga Carmona beat Bronze really badly in one moment. Obviously, the legend is not done yet. But I think you're right. If there is any vulnerability, and you pointed it out last week or maybe the week before, the Khadijah Buchanan injury is going to be something to monitor because you're going to need some big physical defenders. We're going to talk about Barcelona hitting the weight room and playing the way they played. We'll save that for the Group D discussion. But you're going to need some defenders with some muscle mass in there to play in these knockout stages.
Yeah, no doubt. And I think, God forbid any injury
Yep.
kind of like just thins things out further. And we talked about it also a couple weeks back, that WSL slate. I mean, Chelsea needs to hope that they stay in control of that league, because if they've got to play all those players big minutes down the stretch, that could spell real trouble for them in the back. But still a lot of time to kind of get things sorted out. Let's slide ahead to the team that Chelsea beat to take the group, Real Madrid. They finish the group stage with 12 points. Really great showing, especially considering what happened last year to this squad. What were your main takeaways?
Senior Bruin was on a rampage after she netted that brace on match day 2 versus Celtic and then scored in each of their next 3 matches. She was held scoreless against Chelsea, but I thought there was a really interesting move on match day 6. It didn't seem like Bruin and Caicedo were really getting a lot done versus Chelsea. As we say, we have some questions about their defense. It just might not have been Bruin and Caicedo's night that day. And they both get subbed off in the 60th minute, but it's for Naomi Feller and Alba Redondo, which is a great switch. We talked about that depth. Now we get to see Antonea return. She's going to add a little more attacking depth. I think it's going to come down to really that big 4. Bruin, Weir, Caicedo, likely Redondo coming off the bench to create some scoring opportunities and just take some pressure off of Misa Rodriguez in that defense. I do want to mention one thing about Antonea. I think it was middle of the second half, a pretty telling moment. She is, going for the ball and basically just hits Lucy Bronze with a stiff arm directly in the nose, gets called for the foul. I got to tell you, and I didn't expect her to, Antonea didn't seem particularly remorseful about delivering the blow to Lucy Bronze. Might be some leftover Barcelona Real Madrid dislike there, but that's football.
Yeah, I'd love to see that kind of competitiveness and physicality. This was a tough match. I mean, I think Real Madrid really wanted this one. It's such a night and day switch from last year where they really mailed it in. I mean, they obviously got eliminated early. I think it was like 4 matches of the 6 they were already out of it.
Yeah.
But even before then, the spirit just kind of wasn't there. In this match, you mentioned it, a little bit of a mental breakdown from Olga, a little bit of bad luck as well. Just, a hand in the wrong place, just kind of.
Unlucky?
No. Yeah, it's a tough one. It's a tough one. Maybe the handball, I'll probably unlucky, I'd say.
Yeah, the other foul is just a foul. It's just a bad foul. Yeah.
Unlucky that they called the foul, I suppose. Real Madrid outshoots Chelsea. They notched 15 shots, but just 3 on target, despite 57% possession in the match. But then you look at Senior Bruin, Alba Redondo, 0 shots attempted for those 2 players. It's like, gonna need a little bit more from them.
Yeah.
But in my notes, I wrote better here than in the knockout stage. You can kind of get this downer of a performance out of your system. You still make it through. They got a small bounce back win today, 2-0 at Villarreal. Redondo scored. Teresa Abellera scored. So nice to see them kind of getting things back on track. I think this team's going to dust themselves off and really make a good showing of it once they get to the quarterfinals. I mentioned the betting odds at the top. Real Madrid has the worst odds to win the Champions League. I'm not sure I like that, though.
I mean, I love the mental makeup of this team. I like their toughness. I like some of the veterans. I mean, we've talked extensively about adding Redondo and what she does. Felipe Angeldal is a great addition also. I think there were some concerning metrics, though, and they kind of bared out from watching them play. I probably would have guessed that they attempted more shots from outside the danger area than they actually did. It felt like they attempted a lot. But when I kind of was combing through, I was like, okay, maybe not as high a percentage as I had thought. But I think it's interesting to look at Madrid throughout the group stage. They don't have a single player in the top 10 in progressive passes, passes into the final third, or passes into the penalty area, which is kind of why I thought those shots outside of the penalty area might skew a little higher. But to be fair to them, in terms of progressive passes, both Olga and Angeldal are tied for 11th. So they're not in the top 10, but they're just outside. Olga's also 11th in passes into the final third, and both Caroline Weir and Felipe Angeldal are 3 passes into the penalty area behind Lindsay Horan, who sits in 10th. So they're hovering outside the top 10 in those metrics, but I did think it was interesting, like when you kind of look at FB Ref, one of our stat go-tos, it was odd when you go down and you look and you don't see any Real Madrid in those top 10s. But how about some good metrics? Linda Caicedo, number 1 in goal creating actions with 9. She's first in progressive carries. She's first in carries into the penalty area and 3rd in progressive passes received. So why don't all those players have progressive passes and passes into the final third? Because Linda Caicedo is just cruising down the field with the ball at her feet.
Absolutely, yeah. Caicedo's been another dazzling player to watch, and I think she looks a little stronger this year. from the waist down. I can kind of mistake her for Manny Pacquiao.
Nice.
But finishing wise, I think they've got to get the ball in a little closer, maybe work on some of that chemistry in the final third to really get past some of these top teams. But excited that they made it through.
For sure. Let's keep it moving. The rest of Group B here. FC Twente, 6 points, recorded both of their victories over Celtic. They had to win 4 matches to get into this tournament, and they did it by a margin of 20-1. They had a real chance to equalize versus Real Madrid on match day 4 before Redondo scored a backbreaker. They had 9 goals for and 19 goals against. I know a minus 10 goal differential is not good, but I feel really comfortable. They belonged in this tournament.
Oh, yeah.
They looked good. They held tough. The defense was very busy. Leonie Vliek led the group stage in dribblers tackled with 16. She was second in total tackles won. Anna Knoll and captain Danique Van Ginkel, they were top 10 in blocks. Kaylee Van Doren, she finished with 4 goals. She had a brace in the opening 2-0 win versus Celtic and a goal in each of the final 2 group stage matches. I know we have our reasons to want to see Ajax in this tournament moving forward, but I feel like there will always be room for more Dutch presence. So I look forward to seeing our pals Twente come back in this tournament soon.
Yeah, no doubt. Totally agree with that. You mentioned the goal differential. I mean, that's kind of acceptable, right? For this team, a team that's going to finish third. They did score in 5 of 6 matches, Twente did.
Yeah.
And I think more importantly, they showed that physically they could hang.
Yes.
So a little bit of the opposite of what we saw last year with Benfica, who, always looked a little small against those big, tough teams, or Roma, who just kind of fades down the stretch of some of these tough matches. Twente is kind of the opposite.
Yeah.
I think physically they hung and they looked like a handful pretty much at any time they were on the pitch. Wanted to also give a quick shout out to defenders Lieska Carlier, Alika Tween, both 23 years old, who are holding down that left side. 21-year-old forward Nikki Van Dijk, also effective, and Amanda Andradotier, who scored versus Madrid, also had a really good tournament. Tons of talent on that side. Really enjoy watching them play. I agree with you, man. I hope to see them back, but maybe not at the expense of Ajax.
Yeah, hopefully we can get both in there.
I love it.
All right, last team in the group here, Celtic, sitting on 0 points. Weren't able to notch a win or a draw. But it was an interesting debut in the Champions League for the Hoops, who I maintain has one of the coolest supporter sections in the sport itself. They were outgunned in every match, and that's understandable. But I use the term hanging tough by Twente. Celtic did the exact same. In the first match versus Madrid, they were down 1-0 until the 72nd minute and lost 4-0. In the second match versus Madrid, they were down 1-0 until the 71st minute and lost 3-0. They had that 2-1 home loss to Chelsea, where Murphy Agnew netted their lone goal of the group stage. But that game was absolutely in the balance for long stretches. It didn't look like, I'm not going to try to rewrite history. I don't think Celtic ever looked like winning that match, but a draw was absolutely live while that match was being played. They were another busy defense. Kelly Clark, Caitlin Hayes, Emma Louise Lawton. They were 2, 3, and 5 respectively in clearances, and they needed to. They were playing that low block. They were trying to soak up pressure and try to get the ball out on the counter. Clark was also 4th in interceptions. Celia Barclay was 5th in INTs, and I thought she held up pretty well, about as well as you could ask somebody to hold up against Caicedo in the second Madrid match. Obviously, you're going to take some wins and losses when you're playing Linda Caicedo. But I think the Hoops, they have some work to do. Last time I checked, they have a little bit of work to do in the Scottish Women's Premier League to get back here. But I would be remiss if I did not mention probably one of my biggest regrets from our coverage is that I did not mention 31-year-old Swedish manager Elena Sadaku more often while we were talking about the Hoops. She was among the 8 nominees for FIFA's 2024 Best Women's Coach after winning the SWPL and qualifying for the Champions League.
Let's go.
The fact that Celtic was in some of these matches as long as they were is an obvious testament to the players. I think you and I look at players first. They're the ones who win and lose matches. But on those margins that we talk about where managers kind of affect the game, that's where you have an impact too. Do you play teams that are better than you, closer than you should, or do you blow out teams that you should? And I think obviously the former is what was happening here. And I think Sadaku is obviously a clear influence on that.
Absolutely. Yeah. Great call on the manager. Totally agree with that. Also, I think some of the players you called out, Caitlin Hayes had a great tournament.
Good.
Murphy Agnew, 26-year-old American Murphy Agnew.
Let's go.
That was such a cool moment to go ahead versus Chelsea at home. I think we were pumped about seeing that environment against Chelsea. I think you could see a little bit of natural rivalry. Aaron Cuthbert, there's that overlap there. A couple other players I enjoyed watching, Lucy Ashworth Clifford and Amy Gallagher also played really well.
Yep.
I don't know. I like this team. I thought they were good. They kind of are where they are in their life cycle.
Yeah, no doubt. And I look forward to seeing their growth. And I think, obviously, if the Scottish Women's Premier League is going to grow, I think it's pretty safe to say Celtic is going to grow. Glasgow City, Rangers, Hearts. It only makes sense that those kind of like four major clubs will grow the sport in that country so they're able to compete in this tournament more often.
No doubt. Yeah. Excited to see that come to pass for sure. Let's skip ahead, though. Group C, my Arsenal, 15 points. They take the group. As I predicted pretty much from the beginning, week in, week out, never wavered.
Yeah.
This match was a little bit mixed. We had the sideways rain that I think already threw things a little bit out of whack. Bayern outshoots Arsenal in this one. Also had the shots on target advantage 6-2, twice as many big chances according to our friends at FOTMob. Also a slight edge in possession and passing. You look at Arsenal, they had the more accurate crosses, more touches in Bayern's final third. They were a little bit more instinctive offensively. Daphne von Domselaar, she was great, 3 big saves. Caitlin Ford was great, unpredictable, really kept Bayern on their toes. And then you get, it was just weird because you get the first goal, the own goal on Viggo-Stotir. Then you get 2 Magdalena Eriksson goals. And then you get the camera cutting to like a worried looking Renee Slagers, like now down 2-1. And now you've got 2 subs that are like in that the other team just scored. Let's get our 2 subs into the game kind of, moment in the match where you see just so often. Not to worry though, a minute after Eriksson's second goal, Katie McCabe corner, who by the way, McCabe versus Julie Gwynn was pay-per-view pretty much all day. That was a great matchup to kind of key in on. But McCabe's corner into Alessia Russo, Mamatovic overruns it, and Russo does what she does, evens the match. Mariona earns a penalty a little bit later, tucks away the penalty kick, 3-2. Arsenal wins the group. Did you take away anything from this match?
You mentioned the word poise when we talked about that West London club that wears the blue jerseys. How about your North London club in red? I thought poise jumped off the screen. Call. That is Alessia Russo's. I Wikipedia'd this. Her middle name is actually Poise. I don't know if anybody knew this. But yeah, Russo and Caldente, you talked about them last week or the week before. That is a 1-2. People might look at it and be like, well, okay, you can't totally build your club around one of them. But if you have both of them, they create a significant amount of danger. Katie McCabe, you mentioned her. She's tied for third in assists throughout this group stage. And, your squad has 17 goals for, and 13 of those were assisted by another player. So we're not talking about just run up ISO ball. We're talking about moving the ball around. I feel like Slagers has to have her fingerprints on some of that. Mariona Caldente is number 1 in progressive passes and number 2 in passes into the penalty area. And just for a little extra for you, because I love this stat as well, Mariona Caldente tied for 6th in blocks. That's a little thing. That's a little thing we call getting it done on both ends, buddy.
Well, that's what that's what I was talking about last week, where she just wants to be around the ball. Like, I could compete with you. Like, it doesn't matter where it's on the pitch or who's on the other side. She feels like she's going to win that matchup. You look at Slagers now: 10 wins out of 11 matches, 8 wins in a row, 31 goals, 5 allowed over that stretch. Russo has scored in 8 of those 11, 10 goals total over that stretch. She's on absolute fire. And then, 5 goals allowed in 11 matches, 31-5. This team gave up 5 goals to Bayern
exactly
the first time around. I gave myself a little bit of a mind bender here. And what sparked it was, I think one of the DAZN announcers, apologies, I can't remember who, but was talking about Real Madrid having more of a chance to win the Champions League than Liga F, which I don't think is incorrect. I don't think they have a chance to win either, but I think they've got a better shot winning the Champions League. I think that also applies to Arsenal.
Yeah.
You look at the WSL, they're 6-3-1. They're in third place after 10, 7 points behind Chelsea. And they have a 2-1 home loss to the Blues, unfortunately. Chelsea looks like an absolute freight train right now. I wonder, not that they would ever explicitly do this, but I wonder if they're looking at the Champions League as a shot to say, hey, we got the 1 seed. We're going to face one of the 2 seeds. Maybe we go for it. Let's sort of like plan around these big time quarterfinal knockout stage matches. Figure out our lineups, make sure everybody's fresh, make sure everybody's ready, figure out our chemistry stuff or just try to maximize it. Because I think to your point, the chemistry's been there. Yeah. But maybe this is kind of like the new focus for this season based on how things have shaken out and grabbing that 1 seed.
I love it. I love it as a concept. And I've heard it in like every league, every football league that has multiple competitions, which is pretty much all the ones that I've ever seen. They talk about this. Like, what would it mean to win the FA Cup if you focus on the FA Cup a little more and you prioritize rest for FA Cup matches? I don't know if that's what Manchester United did last year, the women's team that won the FA Cup. It didn't feel like in the time, and please, drop some knowledge on us in the comments if I'm misremembering this. It didn't feel like United was really like prioritizing the FA Cup. But I've heard a lot of folks talk about this. It's actually funny you mention it. I think it was like a few weeks back. Great Football Podcast. They primarily talk about men's football on there, but it's The Rest is Football. Gary Lineker, Alan Shearer, Micah Richards. They were talking about this with, should you prioritize these kind of competitions if you think you're out of it in the league? And they talked about just like, frankly, the financial interests in finishing high up in the league and the danger of falling down in league play, or possibly, the frustration that comes with more matches not going your way or players becoming unhappy with their playing time, things like that. But I think it's very real. I'm glad you mention it. And I want to ask you the question because it sounds like you're hovering around this. I'm not asking you to like make a pick or make a commitment, but I honestly came into this episode wanting to ask you, do you think Arsenal can win this tournament?
No.
Amazing. No. Okay.
No, they can't win the tournament. And I'm not going to I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this show, but
okay.
Stina Blackstenius and her spot. And it's tough because, there's a lot of moving pieces and, the manager changes and there's some players coming in, players going out. Even a player like Alessia Russo, I think that equation has essentially been solved. But the Blackstenius equation, still TBD. Mariona's covered up a lot of stuff there. I think Caitlin Ford has really, really come on recently, as just like hey, I'm going to, mix shit up. I'm going to be flying up and down the field and across, and I'm going to give you another thing to think about. And a really great counterweight to like Mariona's like more thinky kind of football. Like Caitlin Ford is just straight, fast twitch, really cool to watch. But I don't think this team can win the tournament. I mean, I'm a little bit, I wouldn't be shocked if they got bounced in the quarters.
Oh.
To be totally fair. I mean, I think a Wolfsburg, would push them. I think Madrid is not as good as Arsenal. They should definitely win that one. I mean, if it's City's been, there's a lot of injuries there, but I would expect this team to make the semis. I wouldn't be shocked if they got bounced versus one of those two seeds, though.
Okay, that's fair. We can talk about, obviously, we'll discuss City in Group D. I'm going to do the thing, and I'm not trying to be a pain in the ass here. I think you're making the semis. I think you're in. I think whatever team Arsenal faces, I think you look too good. The vibes are too good. I think Blackstenius will figure it out. She's a genius. She's an experienced player, especially when you have Russo and Caldente, who should be able to serve the ball up to her in attacking positions. I think you guys are a lock for the semis.
Well, I'm going to push back a little bit. In a must-win game versus Bayern, obviously the weather was insane.
Yeah.
You managed 2 shots on target.
Sure.
It's like, I get it. There's a lot of really good players, but I think this team is still very, very, very much finding their identity. This is not a fully formed team.
Sure.
We're not sure if this is where they're going to top out, and I think with a lot of flux and with a lot of changes, it'll keep the other team on their toes. Not a lot of tape. You can't really like figure, okay, this is how we're going to stop this team. I think like once things start to settle, I do think that it's possible that teams are able to defend them a little bit better. I mean, if they draw Lyon and that defense, I think it's a really long day. It's a really long 180 plus for my Gunners. And then there's the added downside of playing in the WSL. And to your point, I think you're 100% on the money. This team is in third right now. They don't want to fall out of a Champions League spot. Yeah. Whether it's like United or Brighton there's a lot of stuff can happen. There's still a lot of WSL football to be played. You don't want to risk being out of next year's Champions League in any way, shape, or form. And even finishing third, it's a lot of work to get in. You still have to go places. You still have to win matches. You still have to do a bunch of shit to get there.
Exactly.
So I don't think it's a slam dunk at all. I think the semis is probably where this team tops out. But we'll see. I'm definitely encouraged. And I don't think they're done improving potentially. I think Slager's, still has stuff maybe, up her sleeve, up the organization's sleeve. Yeah. A lot of good players have yet to kind of find their role. If Blackstenius gets unlocked, I think my answer could change a little bit. I think a team like Arsenal could maybe shock one of the other 1 seeds.
You've thrown me through a loop here. Is my math right? It's the quarters then the semis, right? Because it goes from
Hmm.
8 to 4 to 2. Yeah, so you guys wouldn't get Lyon until the semis, which obviously I think the road might end there.
Right. Well, it's probably going to be Lyon, Barca, or Chelsea in the semis
Right.
if you expect it to
Which,
go chalk.
yeah, which obviously tough sledding no matter what. But I favor you guys over any of the two seeds, frankly. We'll obviously talk about Manchester City's injuries, and I'm not trying to poor mouth my own team and be like, no, we're underdogs, we don't have a chance. But like, the injuries, man, they're serious. But we'll get to that. And honestly, it's not even just that. I just like your squad. And maybe there is a little bit left over. It wasn't even a must win last year. It was just a must be a bunch of haters and stop Manchester City from winning the title. But Blackstenius scores those 2 goals in the last 5 minutes and loses the title for Manchester City to Chelsea. That is seared into my brain as I'm sitting in the press box just watching it happen.
I hear that. No, that's totally fair. All right, it's a lot of Arsenal talk. Let's shift gears. I want to talk a little bit about Bayern. So this team, right up at the edge. I mean, this is a team we got to remember bounced last year, didn't even make the quarterfinals. So you could think about their situation. Are they happy making the quarterfinals this year? Are they disappointed going to Arsenal, feeling like, hey, we pushed them. We couldn't get out of there with a draw and really take the 1 seed in this group. Looking at these two teams, I do think Bayern is a smidge better than Arsenal.
Ooh.
I mean, it does pain me to say that, but it's going to come down to, can they get chances?
Yeah.
Because you look at when they do get chances, they're first in the tournament, 0.2 goals per shot. That's a goal every 5 shots. 5 shots is not a big number.
Sure.
So they're cashing when they get a boot on the ball. They're second in the tournament, goals per shot on target, 0.41. That's roughly 1 goal every 2.5 shots on target. The problem is they're not getting up shots. They only got 82 shots in the 6 matches, 14 shots less than AS Roma. So they're sixth. So they're 6th out of 8 total shots per 90, 6th out of 8 in shots on target per 90. They've got to be able to get more out of their elite passing and elite possession. They're just not able to put enough pressure on defenses in the final third. If they're able to unlock that, I think that really helps this Bayern squad.
I think it's a great point, man. And I think so. I have some supporting stats to bear this out. I do want to start with the question, though. I wonder if Pernille Harder starting the proceedings with a hat trick against your Arsenal on match day 1, that's a good way to end up leading the group stage in goals. She had 3 in that one match, and she added another 3. But I don't know if her numbers are, frankly, her impact. I'm not saying Pernille Harder's not a great player. She obviously is. But I don't know if her impact might look a bit inflated than it actually was from netting that hat trick on match day 1. And then you think about, Clara Boule and Julia Gavin. They each have 3 assists. They were able to kind of pass the ball around like you're talking about. They need to add this scoring. Georgia Stanway is number 6 in the tournament in progressive passing distance with 2,961 meters. That's a little less than 2 miles of passing. So it's funny to hear you talk about like all this passing, but they're just not getting shots on target. Stanway is also number 1 in passes into the final third with 75. Second place is Ingrid Eggen. She has 57.
Oh, my God.
So we're talking about, 18 more than Eggen. So they're passing the ball around. Stanway's also number 1 in progressive carrying distance with 1,004 meters. So they're moving the ball around. I think it's funny that you kind of talked about they're holding it, but they're just not really creating these quality shots on target. Is that going to happen in the quarters? Could it happen in the semis? It might be tough. It might be tough to kind of figure that out when you're playing the other elite teams in the tournament.
I think a matchup with Chelsea could be interesting for Bayern. I think that's the one team, just because of how thin Chelsea is in the back,
Sure,
and how technical Bayern is. And I think Arsenal got past them with like 3 weird, an own goal. I mean, the Russo one was great off the McCabe corner, and then Mariano draws the penalty. It wasn't like they went in there and just overran them late in that match. I think if Bayern's able to get it together, Chelsea's a good matchup for them potentially, but they just need more connectivity deep, whether it's Zadrazil or Boule. Stanway's been awesome.
Yeah.
Harder, I think, has definitely cooled off, but she still, put a shot on target. She forced Van Damselaar into like a real big time save. Could have definitely changed the match.
Yep.
But they just need more. They need more kind of like movement, a little bit more creativity. They seem to be a little bit easy to defend down there.
I think that's a good way to put it. They can hold the ball, they can play their style, but then when they get into that final third, it's just like it's just everything, not everything, but things often seem about half a click off. It just not totally working for them in spots. If you are half a click off and you end up drawing Barcelona, enjoy your vacation.
Yep, it's over. All right, couple more teams, Group C. quick shout outs here. Juventus, 6 points off a 1-0 and a 3-0 win over Vålerenga. On the downside, though, they were outscored 11-0 in 4 matches versus Bayern and Arsenal. Still a little bit of growing up to do for the Italian side. Sofia Cantore, quick shout out there, 2 goals. She had the 29th minute winner versus Vålerenga, another 56th minute goal in the rematch. Barbara Bonansea, I think, had a really good tournament. And I think this is the team also lost Estelle Cascarino, who that made a big difference. I think defensively, she was playing really well, and she was also able to get things started in kind of creative ways from deep. You can kind of see the Cascarino DNA in there, obviously Delphine's sister. I think
we have to talk about this.
I think that was like a kind of like a little bit underrated, underreported injury for that side, and I think their tournament just got absolutely derailed once they lost Cascarino.
100%. Look, we got to hold ourselves accountable on this. So I brought up that I regretted not talking more about Celtics manager Elena Sadiku. And I've heard her last name pronounced a couple different ways. I know we have pals in Sweden who watch the program. Shout out to you. We appreciate you guys. Let me know, please, if I'm butchering Elena's last name. But I'm glad you mentioned Estelle Cascarino. She is the literal twin sister of one of our favorite players from this tournament last year. And she's an excellent player. And I feel like we didn't mention her nearly enough. So I'm raising my hand. We should have talked about Estelle more. She was good before she ended up getting the knock and then going out. But I think you're totally right. Her loss was a big impact on Juventus.
Absolutely. One other team to hit, Group C, Vålerenga. They finished the group stage with 1 point. They did cash 3 goals over the 6 games. Tilde Lindvall against Arsenal. Olag Tvedsen scored at the Emirates. Fucking go. And Elise Thorsnes with the 88th minute equalizer to give them the draw 1-1 versus Bayern. Great moments. Karina Shevik, great tournament. Emma Stolengodo also jumped off the screen. Defensively, only 2.5 goals allowed over the 6 matchups. And that was with them pitted against Bayern, against Arsenal, against Juventus, really good teams. And I think a lot like FC Twente, I think physically they held up and really were able to push some of these bigger squads with bigger payrolls.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what makes that physicality jump out to me a little more is I did this with Galatasaray, and they have about half their players who appeared in these matches are either in their prime or entering their prime, 27 or younger. Of the 20 players who appeared in these group stage matches for Vålerenga, 18 of them are 27 years old or younger. So we're talking about a real young roster here. But it is a good point that you raised. 28-year-old Karina Shevik, she was number 1 in successful take-ons in the tournament. She was tied for 4th in key passes. She often jumped off the screen as this Norwegian side's best player.
Oh, yeah.
They will definitely be in the mix next year for the Champions League on the strength of winning Top Syrian this year. They squeaked by the mighty SK Brann by 15 points, but that's not important. They won the league. Might have been by several points. It doesn't matter. Maybe, just maybe, we can be lucky enough to see Vålerenga and our pals from Bergen in the tournament next year.
I mean, let's fucking go. I'd love to see that. Shout out Vålerenga. Great watching you. But yeah, next year might be a different ball game. But that's a different topic for a different episode. Let's shift gears. Group T. Got to start with the champs.
Got to.
Barcelona. You experienced it firsthand with some stakes.
Got to be honest with you, buddy. Going up against this team, not a pleasant experience. And really, anyway. Now, that first match on match day 1, being able to beat them 2-0 was great, felt great. Still often terrifying, as I believe we talked about shortly after the match, where I was just like, wow, every time Alexia has the ball, I'm certain she's going to score. This match, much more uncomfortable. I think a moment that is true in pretty much every match I watch Barcelona play is that there is some time in the middle of the first half where Barcelona's high press is just destroying every pass. City can't do anything to move the ball up the field. And then at some point in the middle of the first half, Jess Park is able to go for a run up the pitch, and she shoots it from beyond the 18 with not a ton of momentum. She's not really able to kind of not even get set, but just like get the ball with strength to put a hard shot in there. And that's just what happens. Like we've talked about it before. Teams go up against Barcelona and you're just getting choked out because they don't let you do anything. There are so many moments where it looks like Barcelona has 13 players on the field to your 11. And I wrote in my notes, Park takes the shot, and, she is a heady player for a 23-year-old. She is really clever, but she rushed that shot because she's just been getting squeezed by a boa constrictor for 20 plus minutes. And she's just like, I got to shoot this or else the chance is going to go away. And it's hard to reconcile in that moment. You're not going to make that shot. You're never going to beat Katakoi from that distance when you're not hitting an absolute laser. So they choke the life out of you, man.
Yeah, we talked about this last year where they just take away every pass. They take away the first, the second, the third, the fourth. They just were like, no, there's nowhere you're going to be able to go with the ball. And all of their players defend like maniacally. It's pretty awesome to watch.
Can we talk about one of those defenders?
Let's do it.
Who is a great defender, but Esme Brutes is a left back, but doubles as a nuclear weapon on offense. So like you're trying to figure this out as they choke the life, as they're pressing you at the top of your own defensive 18. And then Brutes is there. Eva Paior just does that thing that I think you have put this in my brain, and it just makes so much sense. And I put it in my notes. Paior in that match is just like, oh yeah, let me just find my range here. And I'm just going to take a couple shots and, maybe that one's too. Yeah, she's just calibrating and just setting you up. And I know she didn't score in that match day 6 match, but I wrote in my notes, she's for sure gonna score. Like it looked like it. And even though she doesn't score, she's making devastating things happen. And here comes Claudia Pina, who just is right there for a rebound. Put them up 1-0. I just think about Claudia Pina. We talk about her. We talk about how great she is. We talk about the fact that sometimes she's the 8th player mentioned on this squad. She's so great, I can't decide if she's still somehow under-discussed while we're always talking about how she's under-discussed.
I think she's definitely under-discussed. But, I do want to rewind back a couple weeks where I think the discussion between you and I was like, what if they find a spot for Pina and like a specific role from her, a little bit from distance, because like that's kind of where she likes to play.
Yeah.
And that goal from Pina was just one of those where this is what happens when you put 8 devastating offensive players like in the box. You're able to get everybody forward offensively. And, to be honest, you're not afraid at all of City's attack. Like if you get beat by something over the top and you give up a goal, I don't think they would have lost any sleep at all.
Right.
Much like Chelsea, game plan doesn't change at all, but the ball's pinging around and you just have devastating offensive players. Anybody can get their boot on it, but Pina specifically is one of these players. It's we talk about the NBA where it's like where players don't get a lot of plays called for them, but are able to opportunistically like maximize. She just is like, I'm going to maximize every chance I get. She's so good. I did the exercise where I'm like, I think she might be my favorite Barcelona player. So then I was like, all right, is she my favorite? I'm like, all right, okay, Kika of Nazareth, she's got to be up there. Okay, CGH, I love CGH. Aitana, obviously, world beater. Long story short, I talked myself into a circle, but I think Pina's definitely in the conversation for my favorite Barcelona player for sure. Definitely needs more minutes. Yeah. And definitely needs more attention because I think she is an absolute super talent.
I think you're exactly right. Where if she's just hanging out in the attacking third, or if she's hanging out in the penalty area and the ball comes to her, she's probably going to score because she just has instincts, fast twitch reflexes. She has every skill needed to kind of put the ball away when it just bobbles out to her in any situation. A couple other quick thoughts I had on this match that kind of translate to every other match is Paior nearly scores on a perfect low shot to the corner, but it takes Keating's incredible diving ability to keep it out. This was in the 49th minute. And as I'm sitting there taking notes, I just write, and I know you always get a kick out of this because I'm a 1,000-year-old man. I write, Jiminy Christmas, it's only been 5 minutes. Because every time you play against Barcelona, if you care about the team playing against this Barcelona team, they're just pelting you with shots. And you're like, well, surely 15 minutes have gone by. Glad we survived that. Nope, it's been 5. And we're due for 200 more shots, it feels like. And the last thing I want to talk about that I think you had in your notes as well, if I looked at the doc, I try not to spoil what I see you're going to write as well. But I think you noticed this, is Aitana Bonmati on her goal. She stays onside because her instincts are absolutely incredible and she times her runs as perfectly as any midfielder could ever do. She times her run perfectly from just inside the halfway line. She gets the ball and then despite a relatively sizable size disadvantage, she fights off Wahhabi and then nutmegs Keating for the goal. And it's one of those things where I was just like, Darren Sproles in the NFL was never the best player. He was never the best player in the world the way Aitana Bonmati is. But I was just like, that is a diminutive person who still puts in so much work in the weight room on their core strength. The fact that she has all of the skills and the talent and the genius that she has. And then on top of that, I can still muscle up when I have to score a goal. That's just unbelievable.
That play was unreal. You can see the size difference between her and Wahhabi, like with the naked eye. It's like obvious. And Wahhabi can't get anywhere. He can't even foul her. Can't even do. No. There's nothing that can be done. It's almost like the bigger sibling and the younger sibling, and he's just holding the younger sibling's top of their head and just keeping them at bay. That's kind of what she did, and then was able to finish between the legs of Keating under pressure, just disregarding the defender. A real top level defender at that, like if she was nothing. Yeah, I mean, an unbelievable play. Had to feel like a backbreaker. And then the Alexia missile.
Come on now.
I mean,
what are you going to do?
Well, okay, I'm going to do a little announcer corner here real quick.
Yes.
On that play, Alexia just fires a fucking dart. That
yes.
I mean, it doesn't feel like any other player in the world could do exactly that. And then the commentator was like, oh, Alexia had Keating rooted to the spot in a very British accent. Translated into American, frozen goalkeeper. Let's fucking go.
Mm-hmm.
And I also want to give the announcers on DAZN en Español a little bit of a shout out. I lamented the lack of spoiler alerts in football. Got a spoiler alert from the Spanish commentators in this one.
Let's go.
I wasn't able to grab the name of the announcing team, but the announcer says, "Vamos a dar un pequeño spoiler." And before going on to talk about Salma Pariuelo showing up in the starting lineup, I was like, let's fucking go. This is what we've been waiting for. So shout out to the team, rooted to the spot, fucking awesome. And then un pequeño spoiler from DAZN en Español, much appreciated from your guys. Salute the entire DAZN squad for sure.
I knew the DAZN team was watching these podcasts. So you planted that seed. You absolutely get credit. That counts as also a good prediction. That counts as you nailed that prediction as well. So I appreciate you for your service.
Yeah, definitely a memo went out in the DAZN offices that I'm not sure where those are, or if they exist, or if everybody's remote. Who the fuck knows? But anyway, shout out to them. I want to talk about City. That's your squad. Obviously, it was tough, kind of going through it. My first thought, the injuries. I mean, tough to overcome those when you're playing against a team like Barcelona. My second thought, roll the tape. If you give up too many shots on target, if the ball spends too much time in the wrong third of the field, I mean, whether it's Patri or Pina or Bonmati or Alexia, they're just loaded with players. I'm going to go the other way. Hate to do it to you, buddy.
That's fair.
But I'm going to say 3-0 Barcelona. Doesn't doom City in the quarterfinals. It's a result that's at least respectable, especially considering the injuries. And then both these teams can kind of head into the knockout stage, on a somewhat positive note, I would say.
Just wonderful job by you. You told me, you tried to tell me. I let my hubris get in the way. I talked about it the whole time. I was like, I got a bad feeling about this. I did my little Star Wars quote, thought I was funny, all that stuff, but then was like, no, but we're still going to find a way. And you were dead on. Shout to you, just nailing the predictions in this episode. Chelsea winning all 6 matches. Spoiler alerts from the DAZN broadcasters. And now this 3-0. You're on fire, my good man. Go play the lotto immediately.
Un pequeño spoiler for next week. I'm going to have some good predictions.
Damn right. I hear that. So you tried to tell me you were obviously dead on. I want to crank up the excuse machine. But first, I did mention at the top of this podcast, I'm a little under the weather, and the doctor said to get plenty of fluids. So 2-beer show. But seriously, everybody, just be responsible, everybody. I mean, that's what I'm trying to do out here. Nothing crazy. I'm an old man. But anyway, let me crank up the excuse machine. Manchester City Football Club desperately needs to get healthy. I just don't see a path for that to happen. When you think about that match day 6 match versus Barcelona, Mary Fowler, 21 years old, Lily Murphy, 18 years old, Alba Fugino, 20, the aforementioned Jess Park, 23. They're part of a fantastic young core. But if you want to keep some control in any kind of attacking position versus Barcelona, you need experienced players with big match experience. And so if you just think about the top 4, there's no Lauren Hemp. Now, she's only 24 years old, but she played in all 6 2022 Euro matches and logged more than 500 minutes. And she also played more than 500 minutes across all 7 matches in the 2023 run to the World Cup final. I haven't seen anything since the club announced that she had successful knee surgery on November 19th. So let me just tell you, buddy, that doesn't seem good to me. I cannot find any details, and please drop in the comments if I'm missing something. I haven't seen any real updates from the club since that November 19th announcement that said successful knee surgery. It doesn't specify what ligaments it's on, nothing like that. So I don't know what that means for Lauren Hemp. Obviously, in this last match, there's no Bunny Shaw. She's 27. She's physically strong enough to battle it out with Barcelona. You know she's never scared. Gareth Taylor said after the second St. Polten match that he didn't expect Bunny back until the new year. And then he had some pretty concerning quotes about how at that point they were still looking at the injured area. Gotta say, don't like that. Don't like extended investigation in any injury. Next, there's Viv Miedema. I know she's new to the club, but she's 28. She's the record goal scorer in the WSL. You already know what time it is with her. She had 4 goals in the 2017 Euros, including a brace to win the final. She had 3 goals in the 2019 World Cup, led the Dutch to the final in that World Cup, losing to the United States. You just need a player in the center of the park like her if you're going to compete in a big tournament like this. Taylor said about Miedema on December 11th that she is back on the training pitch, so a little more encouraging news there, and he expects her to return to play in early January. So that is somewhat reassuring. And then the last player I want to talk about, Alex Greenwood, 31 years old, the captain. She was a substitute in the 2022 Euros, appearing in 5 matches, but she played every second of every match in the run to the World Cup final in 2023. She's a critically important player. She is a smart player, an organizer of the defense, and the club announced that she had successful MCL surgery on December 19th. So from what I can remember, if you're having surgery on your MCL, I think you're usually out, and please, again, I'm no doctor, even though I'm giving you medical advice on how to recover from flu-like symptoms. You could probably expect her to be out at least 3 to 4 months. I think that's like if memory serves on MCLs. And sometimes you see players take longer than that to recover, depending on the severity of the injury. I think ESPN's story said the Lionesses might have to look at playing the 2025 Euros without Alex Greenwood.
Wow.
So all that is to say, you have no shot of beating Barcelona in a spot like that because those 4 players are supposed to buoy the young talent that you have and propel your squad to a deep run in a Champions League.
Yep.
So I don't mean to sound defeatist, but that's just the nature of sports sometimes, is that you have a great team, you have a good run, you thought you were going to challenge for the league, you thought you could possibly challenge, at least maybe even make a final, depending on how the draw shakes out. You beat Barcelona in that first match on match day 1, and everything's coming up roses, and then all of a sudden the injuries pile up, and now it looks like there's a legit possibility that you're out in the quarters.
Yeah, it's not even just the injuries piling up. It's those, I mean, Miedema is obviously, legend, but Hemp, Shaw, and Greenwood were balling this year. I mean,
Yes.
like those are 3 players that you cannot afford to lose. You mentioned kind of like the youth movement. You could throw Kiara Keating in there, still just 20 years old, who had a really good game. I mean,
great,
huge stop, stared down Ava Pior and got a big time save. You could look at Gio Roord. She rocked the crossbar, 37th minute. You kind of needed that one. I mean, like talking about like a little bit of magic that you just need something, right? Like, when you're playing a Barcelona, you need things to kind of break your way. I thought Lily Murphy looked good. I think she could have came on a smidge earlier, but to your point, without those vets kind of connecting things and elevating a player like Murphy, she's a little bit out on an island. And then the last player I'll mention, Mary Fowler, I know it's against Barcelona. I know it's a tough matchup. I would have liked to see more from Fowler.
Yep.
I don't think she kind of put enough pressure. It's still fresh on the mind, but like Caitlin Ford was able to put pressure on Bayern Munich just through work rate, just through effort. I don't think I saw the same thing from Fowler. I think I saw a couple of little flashes, but Esme Brooks, who you mentioned on the other side, is kind of more what I want to see from Fowler. It's like, let's just fucking gun it. Like, let's use some of the physicality. Let's use some of those physical tools. Give ourselves the opportunity to kind of like unleash some of that talent when the moment calls. And I think Fowler was a little bit passive in this one. Didn't totally love the look. Obviously, still a young player as well. But yeah, I think without those 4 excellent players, it's going to be really tough this Champions League season for sure.
Yeah, and we've talked about it with Fowler, where there are times where you look at her and be like, oh, this is for sure one of the best young players in the world in terms of passing and anticipation. But she has those matches where she just kind of disappears. And I don't mean it pejoratively. It's not like a character flaw. It's just something that happens in athletics where you have great players. And then sometimes, not every player can be great every single match. Like that's just the way it goes. I wrote at one point in my notes, not the right game. With those 4 players out, this just couldn't be the game where Fowler didn't have a big impact.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you just needed her to really kind of be there and kind of create those scoring opportunities for her teammates. So again, it's Barcelona. I'm not going to hold it against her. That's going to happen against the best team, or maybe the second best team in the world, to the Orlando Pride, obviously. I will say, if I want to do a little dive into the stats, there aren't a ton since these injuries have come into play. But Fowler she's tied for first in through balls. She had 4. Kind of creating those dangerous passes in group play. Yui Hasegawa is top 5 in passes into the final third, through balls, tackles, interceptions. She remains an absolute baller, despite a couple tough moments throughout this group stage. But she is one of those players where we still have a decent amount of experience losing Greenwood in the back 4. But the experience outside of Keating, who you mentioned is a young up-and-coming star, Kasparai, Wahhabi, Alexandri, Alana Kennedy, Yui Hasegawa, it's like as you get forward, though, you start to lack that experience and that age. And like you said, that's just going to make it hard to win matches. I don't mean to sound overly pessimistic, but, do you see them beating Lyon over 2 matches? Do you see them beating Chelsea? Do you see them beating, well, they're not going to draw Barcelona. I have a hard time thinking that City in this state could beat Arsenal. And let me just tell you, if I'm talking about having bad feelings about things, I have a bad feeling that we're going to draw your Gunners.
Wow. That's not a good matchup for City now.
Bad.
You can also look at Chloe Kelly, who is not available, wasn't available for this one.
Yep.
The other thing about losing elite players is it just puts so much extra pressure on other players. Like, you see a player like Yui Hasegawa, who I thought had a good game, but had to do a lot more work than she's used to get the same result. And then when you look at Barca on the other side, who has all 10 field players defending when they feel like it, and all 10 players kind of like in dangerous offensive positions when they feel like it, and the ball's there, it's such an advantage to be at full strength. And the flip side, it's such a disadvantage to not have all your players. Makes it really tough. I do want to shift gears, though. A couple other teams, Group D. Let's give them a proper salute. I want to start with Hammarby. What are you going to remember from this Hammarby side?
I liked watching them play, and I want to watch them play more. So I talked about this earlier, so I want to do the whole thing now. Who is going to do the thing where they secure the rights to Damallsvenskan, Top Syrian, Eredivisie Vrouwen, the Scottish Women's Premier League? Who's going to secure the broadcasting and the streaming rights for those leagues so we can watch them here in the United States of America? I would like to see that happen.
Yeah, maybe pull in some sponsors, and maybe it could be the newly formed ITC Media Corporation.
There you go. You never know, man. We'll see what, I got to check the bank account to see how much we can pay for the rights. It might be tricky.
Yeah, I'm not sure if these beer sponsors are going to write a check big enough to let us get that. But who knows? I mean, who are we bidding against?
That's a good question. I mean, you never know. ITC Media Corp, we could always call the great Cameron Pope, the great Chris Sharples. Maybe Leanne Sanderson might want to do a broadcast. She was actually on the pregame show for the Arsenal match, which was fantastic on DAZN. Always great to see the legend out there. Shout out to Leanne, of course. I digress. I want to watch these games. I want to watch more Damallsvenskan, and I want to watch more Hammarby in general. I think maybe my favorite stat from the group stage, at least from this group, Katinka Thunberg, the dangerous forward who had a goal in each victory over St. Polten in the group stage, and is currently tied for 7th in XG. She also leads the tournament in fouls committed.
Let's go.
She has 16 fouls committed, and her her teammate, Julie Blockstead, is number 2 with 15 fouls committed. So I like Hammarby's style.
Don't come up in here.
No chance. And it doesn't matter if I'm a forward, I'll still foul you. They're about that business over there. So I love the way they play. I want to posit a question to you. That 9-0 loss to Barcelona on match day 2. So Barcelona loses on match day 1. Then they go home and play their first home match of this tournament. They're title holders. And Hammarby has the misfortune of being the piñata, frankly, in that match, losing 9-0. Do you think that has an impact and that sets a tone for the rest of the group stage? Do things shake out differently for Hammarby? Maybe they don't finish second above Manchester City, but do things look at least a little different if they're not put in that absolutely unwinnable situation on match day 2?
I don't think so. I mean, this team still notched 6 points in the group, 2 wins over St. Polten. They weren't going to beat Barcelona. And I'm not sure they were going to push City that far. Now, the other thing to consider, you mentioned her, Katinka Thomberg, 20 years old.
Yep.
Ellen Vangerheim, who also played really well, 20 years old. Julie Blockstead,
Yes.
you also mentioned, 23.
Mm-hmm.
This is a young team that I think we expect to be back. They kind of didn't really, I don't know, you didn't really see any kind of like lasting effects from that match, I don't think. I think they came out pretty tough. They might be just young enough where they've got that amnesia. It's like, all right, well, yeah, it was okay. It's Barcelona. Like Barcelona must seem like giants to some of these young players that are just basically still roughly just graduating from their teenagehood. So I don't think there was a negative effect. I would say I think it was probably good experience. Like it's good to kind of take an L like that against a real, the second best team in the world. What are you going to do?
Right.
And like I said, I think this team still has some growing to do, but not in a way that's disparaging.
Yeah.
These are young players that show real flashes, that play really hard. So it's not like you need them to grow up. You just need them to kind of mature into the fully formed footballers that they're going to end up being.
That is, yeah. I think that's really well said, man. I'm with you on that. And they definitely, like, the difference between like growing up and then maturing into a fully formed football player. They are another squad similar to Vålerenga that have a physical presence already. I know I kind of make it a little silly talking about the fouls, but they play strong.
Mm-hmm.
They play tough. We said a lot of the similar things. Now, obviously, BK Häcken was a significantly more experienced team. They had some great veterans on that squad. But it makes me want to watch more Damallsvenskan football. I want to see them back in the Champions League next year. Now, do I want to see Hammarby back in the Champions League at the expense of Benfica, like what happened this year? I don't. I am very greedy. I want to have Benfica and Hammarby and possibly BK Häcken in the Champions League next year. So I realize throughout the course of this podcast, I've named several teams that I want in the Champions League. So however it works, let's get them all back in there.
All right, let's go. 24-team field. Let's go.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, last quick note on Hammarby. Held Barcelona to 3 goals at home next time around. So there you go. 2 wins over St. Polten, like as mentioned, and great community of fans, minus that one fucking asshole that threw something at Bunny Shaw. We'll talk about that one later. But outside of that, fans pretty cool. On the whole, yeah. Let's talk about that last squad. St. Polten didn't notch a point, unfortunately, but I think, a good showing. What are you going to take away from their 2024 group stage?
I totally agree in a good showing, and I'm curious if you agree with me on this. I don't care that they didn't get a point in the group stage because I think they were a revelation for 2 newbies like me and you to watch them last year and to kind of think like, oh, this team, they win the Austrian League every year. We're kind of getting our bearings. We're figuring out more European women's football. We're like, okay, they obviously dominate the Austrian League, but they have no shot in the Champions League. This team is so much better than they were last year.
Oh, yeah.
Kamila Dubkova led the way for the Austrian side with 2 goals. Melanie Bruntaler and Valentina Madel chipped in with 1 each. I thought Sarah Matner-Tremblot did a really admirable job in the midfield. Mm-hmm. She was top 10 in tackles won, dribblers tackled, and interceptions. And she was also tied for second in fouls drawn with her teammate, Bruntaler. So they were able to get a little more on the front foot than they were last year. This is the incremental progress that we talk about. So if they continue to just blast teams over in the Austrian League and continue to just kind of sign players, work on their strength and conditioning, get these reps in the UEFA Women's Champions League, I look forward to seeing them back. They clearly, even though they've come in here, this is 2 Champions Leagues in a row that they haven't notched a point, they get through the qualifying. They're doing something right to get here. I'm really excited to see them play. And I know I mention her every time we talk about them. 25-year-old Slovakian Maria Mikolajova. She scores a fair amount of goals in domestic league play. She hasn't got on the board yet in the Champions League. I think she can. I like her creativity. I like that she's seemingly standing in the right spot in a lot of situations in Champions League play. So I'm calling it right now. They make it to the Champions League next year, and they're going to get a win in the Champions League at some point next season.
Oh, a win. I like that. I really like that. I could definitely see that. I would say a step up this year. Sure. So they double their goal output. I totally agree with you in terms of like what they look like offensively and just cohesively.
Yeah.
So they notched 4 goals in the 6 matches played. You mentioned the Mado goal. That was against Barcelona. How about that? Let's fucking go.
Yeah, pretty good.
Assisted by Maria Mikolajova, who you mentioned. She also wore the captain's armband for their last 4 group stage matchups. So that's a real player right there. And I'm happy to do the honors. We're closing things out with St. Polten. Salute to Karina Schluter. You already know this is maybe we're not the world's foremost AS Roma podcast or Ajax podcast or Benfica podcast or Kika podcast. This is the world's foremost English speaking Karina Schluter podcast. I will not hear any other. The conversation's over. It's over. Karina Schluter. That's our keeper in spirit for sure. Another really solid showing. No sleeves to be seen. A real gamer. She's out here trying to have players only meetings. She's ready to bang the gavel. And when she's not, she's saving shots. ITC favorite through and through. I'm glad we're dismounting on Karina Schluter.
Absolutely wonderful player. Was in at least one team of the week in last year's Champions League. Just a phenomenal player. Love her energy, love her shot-stopping ability in goal. She just ends up being under siege in a lot of these matches, but she holds up as well as she possibly could. I'm with you, man. I'm glad we hit it with the dismount. Tough as nails, too. Could absolutely play offensive line for the Green Bay Packers. Never sleeves. Not out here doing that. Doesn't care what the temperature is. She's out there toughing it out.
Love that. All right. Quick programming reminder. Next week, we're going to be back with our best 11s for 2024. We talked about this a little bit on text. We're going to do a draft. So each of us are going to draft, and then we're going to join forces like Voltron to get our show's best 11. I want to kind of like mind meld. I want to share notes. I want to whiteboard to make sure that we can have the best possible best 11. We've seen a lot of crap lists. Shout out to the expected own goals guys as well, who did a great breakdown of all these crap lists and some of the not so crap lists. So we're going to try to do our best not to have a crap list. And I think the draft leading into the melding is probably like our formula to be able to make that happen. We're also going to be back in the new year to talk player movement, NWSL. Things are heating up there. In the new year, we're going to switch gears a little bit. We're going to, go a little European, get a little bit more culture in our lives, talk a little WSL from Bundesliga, Liga F, Serie A Femenil, and the Premier League. And February 7th, live on YouTube. You already know. Make sure you're following. Make sure you're subscribing because we will be covering the quarterfinals draw of the UEFA Women's Champions League live on YouTube. As mentioned, the football kicks back off March 18th and 19th. So there'll be a little bit of a lull, Champions League wise between now and March, but I think there's going to be a ton happening. And as mentioned, your boys are going to be diving way, way, way into all the great football being played in Europe. So make sure you're subscribed.
But Dino, are you guys going to be streaming during the quarterfinals draw, or will you be streaming live after the quarterfinals draw?
That's a good question. I mean, honestly, it might be a little rough on you, buddy, because I think they run that thing like 7 a.m. Eastern.
Oh, shit. Yeah, that is true, huh? All right. Well, I coincidentally have the day off from work. Everybody keep this quiet. Don't talk to my boss. I had other things to do that day. We don't need to talk to anybody's employer about all this. I have the day off for the quarterfinal draw.
Wonderful. Yep, samesies. All right, man. Anything else you want to hit before we get out of here?
I think that's it. I think I've properly incriminated myself. Actually, it's never a crime. Let me just tell everybody, all your days off that you earn are yours to take for whatever reason you want. So no shame here.
Yeah.
We earned our days off. We take them for the reasons we like. I think we've substantially covered it now that I've somehow chosen to go down this road.
All right, man. I think we did it in a roundabout way. This has been another episode of Into the Channel. Thank you for watching, listening, following, liking, subscribing, commenting, just plain hanging out with your boys. And remember to like if you like, to subscribe or follow Into the Channel, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you like to watch or listen. Leave us a review over your favorite podcast app. Links to all of our socials in the show notes of this episode. And a big thank you to my co-host as well, Mr. Grand Angle. Powered through. I appreciate you, bro. I mean, a successful group stage. Couldn't have done it without you.
Likewise, buddy. We made it through 6 matches. 6 match days. Really 12 match days if you think about it, because 2 each match day. A lot of matches of football. I'm not going to try to do the math right now because I'm not going to be good enough at that. But I wouldn't do it with anybody else, buddy. Appreciate you rock with us. And we wouldn't do it with anybody else other than you guys who are helping us produce the show, watching the show, chiming in, dropping knowledge in the comments. We greatly, greatly appreciate the participation from you guys. Thanks for always keeping us honest. And we will see you all next time.